There was a dessert that once sat on almost every important table across Western Canada. Grandmothers made it, small-town diners served it, church communities counted on it. For generations of Canadian families, one slice could bring back memories from decades ago. But today, many Canadians have never tasted it. Some have never even heard its name. And the strangest part? It didn't disappear because people stopped loving it. It disappeared because the world around it changed. That recipe was called flapper pie, but its story isn't just Canadian. It starts somewhere else entirely, and that's part of what makes it so interesting. Picture Western Canada nearly a century ago. A cold winter morning on the prairies, the kind of cold where the snow seems endless and the wind moves across the fields with nothing to stop it. Inside a farmhouse kitchen, the stove is warm. The kettle is already boiling. A handwritten cookbook sits open on the counter, its pages marked by years of use. There were no electric mixers on the countertop, no shelves of ready-made desserts, no quick trip to a supermarket for whatever was forgotten. Families worked with what they had. They knew how to stretch ingredients. They knew how to make ordinary things feel special. And sometimes the most memorable recipes came from the simplest cupboards. Here's where most retellings of this story get it wrong. Flapper pie wasn't born on the prairies. Its roots trace back to the United States, to a company that had nothing to do with pie at all. The National Biscuit Company, known today as Nabisco. Decades earlier, in the 1800s, a Presbyterian minister named Sylvester Graham had promoted a simple, whole-grain cracker as part of a health-focused diet. By the turn of the 20th century, Nabisco was selling graham crackers commercially, marketed as sturdy, portable food, the kind pioneers could carry on long journeys west. To help sell more crackers, the company printed a simple recipe right on the box: a custard pie with a graham cracker crust. It was an advertising trick as much as a dessert. By the 1920s, that humble box recipe had transformed. Newspapers across the Canadian prairies, including the Edmonton Journal, ran versions of it, using it to promote graham crackers to housewives. And it was somewhere in that decade that the recipe picked up a new name: flapper pie. When most people hear the word flapper today, they think of the 1920s, jazz music, bold new fashion, a generation of young women challenging old expectations. The pie's name is widely believed to come from that same cultural moment. One newspaper at the time reportedly described the dessert as pretty, good-tasting, and secretly sturdy underneath its light, fluffy appearance, much like the flappers themselves. Nobody can say for certain who chose the name first, or whether it started as a marketing idea. What's clear is that it worked. The pie sounded modern, and next to older, heavier desserts, it looked modern too. So while Nabisco's graham cracker pie found only modest, short-lived popularity in the United States, something different happened once it crossed into Western Canada. There, on farms across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, it found exactly the audience it needed. Because the ingredient that made this pie possible wasn't expensive. It wasn't rare. It was something most families already had: graham crackers. At a time when traditional pastry crusts, made with flour, shortening, and hours of careful rolling, were still common, a graham cracker crust was something new, practical, reliable. It let home bakers create a beautiful dessert without spending an entire morning on pastry. That mattered enormously through the 1930s as the Great Depression tightened budgets across the prairies. Milk, eggs, sugar, and a box of graham crackers. Nothing exotic, nothing that required a special trip to town. Flapper pie became a dessert that ordinary families could make and share again and again without guilt. It showed up at church suppers, at community halls, at small-town diners where travelers stopped along long prairie highways. A pie wasn't just judged by taste. It carried the name of the person who made it. People knew who made the tallest, most beautiful meringue in town. For the crust, Combine 1½ cups of graham cracker crumbs, 1/3 cup of melted butter, and 1/4 cup of sugar. Set aside a small handful of the mixture. That detail matters later. Press the rest firmly into a pie dish and bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 minutes. For the custard, whisk together 2 cups of whole milk, 1/2 cup of sugar, 2½ tablespoons of cornstarch, a pinch of salt, and 3 egg yolks. Cook slowly over medium heat, stirring constantly until it thickens into something smooth and rich, never rushed, never left unattended. Off the heat, stir in a little butter and vanilla, then pour it into the warm crust. For the meringue, whip the 3 reserved egg whites with a little cream of tartar until foamy, then gradually add sugar until the mixture turns glossy and holds stiff peaks. Spread it over the warm custard, making sure it touches the crust at every edge. That seal keeps it from shrinking as it bakes. Sprinkle the reserved graham crumbs on top, then bake until the peaks turn lightly golden. And then comes the hardest instruction of all. Wait. Let it cool. Let the custard set. Let the flavors settle into each other. If you've ever seen a traditional flapper pie sitting on a counter, you might have noticed something strange happening to the meringue as it cools. Tiny amber-colored beads of syrup begin to form on the golden peaks. To some modern bakers, these are known as meringue tears. In pastry school, they're often taught as a mistake, a sign of over-baking, where the egg whites contract too quickly and squeeze out moisture. But to generations of Prairie grandmothers, these little golden droplets weren't a failure at all. They called them dewdrops, and they were treated like a badge of honor. It was visual proof that the pie was fresh, incredibly light, and made by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. There's actually a beautiful piece of food science behind it. Because flapper pie relies on a warm custard base, spreading the whipped egg whites directly onto the hot filling is crucial. The residual heat from the custard actually bakes the bottom of the meringue from below, sealing it in place and keeping it from weeping or slipping off the pie later. It's a delicate culinary dance of temperature and timing, one that Prairie home cooks mastered not through food science degrees, but through quiet intuition and a lifetime of practice. By the late 1930s, flapper pie was already a Prairie staple, but its story didn't end there, and neither did its decline. After the Second World War, kitchens across Canada began to change. Instant pudding mixes hit grocery shelves. Store-bought desserts became easier to buy than to bake. A custard that once required 30 careful minutes of stirring could now be made in a few with a packet and a spoon. Nobody decided on any single day to stop making flapper pie. It simply stopped being necessary. The handwritten recipe cards stayed tucked inside old cookbooks. The pages yellowed, and gradually, some of the people who knew the recipe best were no longer there to pass it on. By the 1970s and 80s, an entire generation of Canadians had grown up without ever tasting it. But here's the twist. Flapper pie never actually vanished. It just went quiet. It survived in family recipe boxes, in the margins of community cookbooks compiled for church fundraisers, in notes scrawled by grandmothers who never wrote down exact measurements because they didn't need to. And in the last couple of decades, it's been finding its way back. Through food writers who grew up hearing about it, through Prairie bloggers determined to track down Grandma's version, through a modern wave of nostalgia for the foods that built a region. Today, when someone bakes a flapper pie from an old family recipe, they're not just making dessert, they're recreating a connection to the farmers who worked that land, to the church halls that once smelled like warm graham and vanilla, to a version of Prairie life that mostly exists now in memory. It was never designed to be photographed or turned into a trend. It existed for a simpler reason. Someone wanted to make something comforting for the people around them. That was enough then. Maybe it still is now.